In 1984, Marvin Gaye was killed by his own father, a shocking moment that left not just fans devastated, but 3 children facing the impossible task of carrying his name, his legacy, and his pain. Marvin Gaye III, Nona Gaye, and Frankie Gaye each took a different path. From courtrooms and Hollywood sets to private battles far from the spotlight, their stories are filled with triumph and heartbreak. Marvin III fought to defend his father's music in the infamous Blurred Lines lawsuit. Nona rose to fame as a singer, model, and actress, working with Prince and even stepping into The Matrix. And Frankie chose a quieter life, honoring his father's memory while protecting the family's legacy in silence. 4 decades after Marvin's death, his children are still answering the same question. What does it mean to be the child of a legend? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear goes beyond Motown hits and courtroom headlines. This is the untold story of Marvin Gaye's children in 2025, still carrying the weight of a name the world will never forget. Marvin Gaye III. He carried his father's name, but with it came a burden that felt more like a curse than a blessing. Marvin Gaye III, the son who shared his legendary father's name, grew up in a shadow darker than anyone outside the family could imagine. Few people know one of the most painful details of Marvin Gaye's story. Marvin Gaye III was not his biological son. His real mother was Denise Gordy, the teenage niece of Marvin's then-wife, Janice Hunter. Denise was only 16 when she gave birth in 1966. To protect reputations and avoid scandal, everything was handled the Motown way, covered up, legalized, and rewritten. The truth was never to be spoken again. From the very beginning, Marvin III had no choice. His identity was dictated by others. He was given the name not out of love, but to preserve appearances. He became the son of a man who was celebrated as the voice of passion and social justice, yet at home was haunted by paranoia, consumed by drugs, and obsessed with control. In 1982, just 2 years before his own death, Marvin Gaye wrote a letter to his lawyer that revealed the cold reality. Marvin Jr. is not blood-related, but I kept him to keep the family together. For Marvin III, those words, discovered decades later at a 2001 auction, were like a verdict, confirming what he had lived his entire life feeling, that he bore the name of a father who never fully embraced him. Someone once said, Marvin Gaye sang like a saint, but lived like a lost soul. Marvin Gaye III might be the clearest proof of that contradiction. During the 1970s, when his father was at the height of his fame, Marvin III lived in sprawling Los Angeles mansions. Yet those walls, filled with luxury, were also his prison. According to one housekeeper, the boy often sat alone by the window for hours, staring out at the garden where his father wrote music. The cruelest part? They almost never spoke. He was forbidden to go near. Whispers inside the Motown circle suggested the reason was Marvin's strange conviction that children who weren't his by blood could drain his artistic inspiration. It sounded absurd, but in the troubled mind of a genius unraveling, it was gospel truth. And for Marvin Gaye III, it meant growing up with a famous name, yet feeling like an unwanted stranger in his own home. There was one incident, buried in internal company records, that revealed just how fractured the relationship between Marvin Gaye and his son had become. During the recording sessions for Sexual Healing, Marvin III was quietly thrown out of the studio. The order came directly from Marvin himself. Don't let that kid look at me. I can't sing with him here. An employee later told Rolling Stone that it was the first time he had seen the Motown legend completely unravel. Marvin hurled a teacup against the wall, screamed uncontrollably, and then locked himself in the bathroom for 2 hours. None of it ever appeared in the official biographies. It was a hidden episode, another silence in a family filled with them. 2 years later, in April 1984, Marvin Gaye was dead, shot by his own father, Marvin Sr., after days of paranoia and violent arguments. The world was stunned. Crowds of mourners filled the funeral, cameras flashing everywhere. But one figure stood out in the shadows, an 18-year-old in a black suit, sunglasses hiding his eyes, hair neatly combed. He didn't speak, and no one dared to approach him. That was Marvin Gaye III, the Silent Son. In 1986, the silence cracked. A legal battle quietly unfolded between Marvin III and the Hunter family, his mother's relatives. He wanted a certificate confirming his legitimacy, a document that would allow him to inherit part of Marvin's estate. But buried in the court files was a letter Marvin had written. "I kept the boy to keep the family. I don't love him, but I can't let him know the truth." When the document surfaced, the case collapsed. The papers were withdrawn. The fight ended before it ever truly began. After that, Marvin Gaye III vanished from public life. For nearly 20 years, he was nowhere. No interviews, no headlines, no stage appearances. Then, in 2023, his name resurfaced, but not in music or legacy. This time, it was in the crime pages. He had been arrested for domestic violence. Police reported finding a gun in his home, blood on his shirt, and a shaken statement from the woman he had lived with for years. For the world, it raised a haunting question. How could the son of a pop idol end up in handcuffs, his name splashed across tabloids for violence? When questioned, Marvin Gaye III gave only one sentence: cold, detached, and devastating. "I am no one anymore." What Marvin Gaye III told police that night, "I am no one anymore," was a sentence colder than any prison term. It carried the weight of a man who, for years, had no idea who he truly was. After the incident, he seemed to vanish. He gave no statements to the press, skipped every court appearance, and slipped into silence. An old friend who had once played alongside him in a Marvin Gaye memorial project back in 2011 described it simply: "Marvin lives like a ghost. He has no phone, no social media, no email. It's as if he's trying to erase himself from the world." That was perhaps the most painful truth of all, that a man who bore the name Marvin Gaye spent his life wishing only to be ordinary. In a letter to a cousin on the Hunter side of the family, never made public, except for fragments revealed in a lawsuit, Marvin III confessed, "I don't need money, I don't need fame. I just want one hug from my father. Not for a picture, not for the camera. Just to know that I had a father. That hug never came, and the wound never healed." For anyone who has grown up under a name too famous to escape, in a family too public to be private, yet without a table full of laughter, Marvin Gaye III's story feels painfully familiar. His life doesn't end with redemption. It ends in silence. Once called the son of a legend, he now exists in seclusion, like a forgotten chapter Hollywood prefers to keep buried. But Marvin III's tragedy was only part of the story. If he was abandoned in silence, his sister Nona Gaye grew up screaming unheard. For her, losing her father at 18 would have been devastating, but losing him at just 10 years old, in a shooting at the hands of her own grandfather, was a nightmare she could never wake up from. Nona Gaye. She was the girl once expected to carry the torch of a legend, Marvin Gaye's daughter, Nona. But instead of stepping into his light, she seemed to vanish, as if hiding a secret Hollywood never wanted the world to see. No one can forget the morning of April 1st, 1984. The news broke like thunder. Marvin Gaye had been shot dead by his own father. The entire nation froze in disbelief. On Gramercy Place in Los Angeles, chaos unfolded. Police barricades sealed off the mansion, cameras clicked furiously, and reporters shoved one another just to glimpse the scene through the smallest crack in the door. But amid the noise and flashing lights, there was a witness almost no one noticed. A 10-year-old girl curly-haired and dressed in a white nightgown, stood silently behind the curtains of her mother Janice Hunter's home, just blocks away. Her name was Nona Gaye. Unlike the rest of America, Nona didn't hear the news through television reports. She heard it with her own ears, the gunshots that shattered her Sunday morning. "That sound split my world in two," she would later recall. "Before that, my father would laugh and call me a princess." After that, there were 3 decades of silence. Hidden deep in the court records from 1984, collected by Los Angeles police, lies a tiny, overlooked footnote. The victim's biological daughter, 10, showed signs of severe psychological distress and is being kept private to avoid media access. That one line tells a story no headline captured. From that day forward, Nona's life veered onto a path few could imagine. Her father's death wasn't just a moment of loss. It was the spark that ignited a chain of events so haunting that it still raises the question: did Marvin Gaye's tragedy end with his death? Or was it only the beginning of a legacy of pain that his children would carry for generations? In 1991, at just 17 years old, Nona Gaye stumbled upon a secret hidden in her mother's apartment. Beneath the floorboards lay an old trunk. Inside, she found a collection of handwritten letters, unfinished, unsigned, but unmistakably written by Marvin Gaye. One of the notes carried a line that would stay with her forever. "Nona is the only light I have ever known, but also the light that scares me the most. If I let her grow in the light I create, will she burn?" The letter was never published, and no one in the family ever confirmed its authenticity. But for Nona, it was real enough. She kept that fragile piece of paper in her wallet for more than 2 decades. And whenever people pressed her about why she never released the unreleased music her father left behind, her answer was always the same: "Because I know there are things that shouldn't be heard by anyone." The following year, Nona stepped into the spotlight herself. In 1992, she released her debut album Love for the Future under Atlantic Records, heralded as the next Marvin Gaye. But almost immediately, controversy followed. Leaked documents suggested she had been pressured to record songs her father had written but never wanted the world to hear. Variety even posed the unsettling question: is Nona Gaye being forced to reenact her father's ghost on stage? One photographer recalled a moment backstage during a promotional shoot. Nona, dressed in the red suit her father had famously worn in 1976, broke down in tears. She was sobbing, he remembered. She said, "I'm not me anymore. I'm the ghost of this theater." Shortly afterward, Nona vanished from the public eye. By 1995, she resurfaced in a Seattle psychiatric hospital under an assumed name. Leaked medical records later revealed she had been treated for dissociative identity disorder and intermittent amnesia. Yet one detail in her treatment disturbed even the doctors. Nona repeatedly spoke of a man in a white suit who sat silently in the corner of her room, whispering the same chilling question: "Do you want your father back?" At first, her doctors dismissed it as a hallucination born from trauma. But then a nurse stepped forward with her own testimony. She had seen a man standing outside Nona's door on several occasions, never signing in, never identifying himself, just watching her through the one-way glass before vanishing. Who was he? A deranged fan? A distant relative? Or someone who knew far more than they should? The mystery was never solved. In 2003, Nona Gaye returned to the screen in a role that stunned many: Z, the fierce wife of Morpheus in The Matrix Reloaded. For those who knew her past, the transformation felt almost impossible. This was the same young woman who had spiraled into depression, lost herself, and disappeared from the public eye. How could she suddenly embody such strength? The answer, perhaps, could be found in a private diary entry she wrote while filming. "When I carry a gun, I am no longer Nona. I am the character. And when the character shoots the enemy, I am shooting at memories." Her co-stars recalled how she often kept to herself, retreating to quiet corners on set. Once, someone overheard her whisper, "If my father knew I was doing action movies, he would laugh. But if I didn't do them, I would die." When the Matrix trilogy ended, Nona vanished once more. For nearly a decade, her only public appearances were brief tributes at events honoring her father, Marvin Gaye. She gave no interviews, leaving questions unanswered. Then, in 2015, a rare photograph surfaced. It showed her stepping out of a convent in Santa Barbara, sparking rumors she had joined a silent healing order that demanded 7 years without speaking. The speculation was never confirmed. But in 2020, after years of silence, Nona posted a single haunting message on social media. "I've been silent long enough, but maybe it's the only way not to scream." Around the same time, archivists uncovered an unreleased Marvin Gaye recording, "Daughter of Silence." In it, he sang softly, "If my daughter can hear this, please forgive the father who didn't know how to love." The song was never released, and Nona has never confirmed if she's heard it. Yet in 2021, during a rare NPR interview, she was asked whether she regretted carrying her father's last name. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gave a tearful smile and said, "I didn't choose the last name, but I learned to survive it." Frankie Gaye. Although not much is known about his third child, Frankie Gaye, he once joined his siblings to pen down a letter to clear misconceptions about the successful lawsuits against Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams' hit song, Blurred Lines. Frankie Christian Gaye, born in 1975 to Marvin and Janice, took an even more private path. Marvin named him after his beloved younger brother Frankie, a fellow musician and Vietnam veteran. Tragically, little Frankie was only 8 years old when Marvin was killed. He grew up under his mother's care, too young to fully grasp the loss. Unlike Nona and their half-brother Marvin III, Frankie chose not to follow a career in the spotlight. No records, no films, no interviews. He opted instead for a life away from the cameras, a deliberate attempt to find normalcy in a family name forever tied to fame. Friends describe Frankie as grounded and kind, a man who never sought attention but never forgot where he came from. Though he avoids public storytelling, he has stood with his siblings when it mattered most. During the 2013 Blurred Lines controversy, Frankie stayed out of interviews but worked behind the scenes, joining Nona and Marvin III in drafting an open letter published in Rolling Stone. In it, they explained why they pursued legal action and what their father's music meant to them. "We will celebrate what would have been our dad's 76th birthday next month. And though we miss him every day, it is through his music that we find our compass and our paths moving forward. We are his children, but we too are his fans, and we hold his music dear." Frankie may not be a celebrity, but moments like that reveal his quiet role. Alongside his siblings, he has become a guardian of Marvin Gaye's legacy, protecting it not for fame, but out of love, loyalty, and respect for the father they all lost too soon. Michael Cooper, the most mysterious son, the unrecognized connections. Among the whispers surrounding Marvin Gaye's private life, one name surfaces quietly. Michael Cooper, the lead singer of the funk band Confrontation. In the 1980s, Cooper was admired for his electrifying stage presence, his stance, his gestures, even the way his voice trembled with emotion. To many, it felt uncannily like watching Marvin himself reborn. Most assumed it was simply the influence of a hero. But in 1999, during a show in San Diego, Cooper stunned his audience. In the middle of his set, he said softly, "I don't imitate anyone. I just sing like..." My father sang. The room fell silent. No one knew what he meant. No one asked. And Cooper never explained. That single remark triggered a quiet search among Motown loyalists. Fans sifted through photos, backstage notes, and long-forgotten studio gossip. One detail stood out. In 1960, Marvin performed in Fresno, California, the very place where Michael Cooper was born. Around that time, Marvin was rumored to have had a brief affair with a lounge singer named Claudine M. Soon after, Claudine vanished from the music scene, and in 1961, Michael Cooper was born. He never publicly identified his father. When pressed, he would only say, "I sing because I have soul in my veins." Coincidence, or a truth buried for decades? Biographers of Marvin Gaye rarely touch the subject, but in a little-known European book titled The Other Marvin, written by one of Marvin's former assistants, there is a chilling line. "Marvin once told me, 'I have many children, but I can only love two.'" The quote has never been verified, yet it echoes uncomfortably with stories that followed. Unfinished letters, late-night phone calls left unanswered, and quiet money transfers sent to names no one could trace. In 1997, a Jet magazine reporter uncovered medical records from a Detroit clinic. They showed Marvin had once been involved with a pregnant white woman named Lisa F. She gave birth to a daughter she named Marvina, then disappeared from the entertainment world. Lisa was never found, the child never confirmed, and yet the rumors multiplied. Some claimed Marvin had secret children in Texas. Others swore he fathered a son in England. There were even tales of a man in Amsterdam bearing Marvin's face, speaking broken English, and refusing to answer questions. Then, suddenly, the investigations stopped. Not because the trail had gone cold, but because it had grown too tangled, too dangerous, too inconvenient. The silence may have roots in a contract signed in 1985 after Marvin's death. When Motown secured the rights to control his image, copyrights, and musical legacy, one obscure clause stood out: limited personal rights to the Gaye brand, including legally recognized children. The reality was harsh. Anyone not legally recognized as Marvin Gaye's child would never be part of his official legacy. They would not appear on television. They would never be granted permission to perform his songs. No museum would carry their names. No stage would invite their voices. It was, in effect, a silent banishment from their own bloodline and from the very industry Marvin helped to shape. So who were these children erased from history? The truth is, no one knows for certain. But in a 2004 interview, Darren T., a former sound engineer who had worked with Marvin, recalled an encounter that left him unsettled. One night, Marvin stopped recording and walked out with a young woman who had long hair. She looked about 19. They sat in his car for nearly an hour. When he returned, he was in tears. All he said was, "I wish I had never gotten into this business." Stories like this matter not because they condemn a man long gone, but because they reveal the hidden pain genius often leaves behind. Children left nameless, wounds left unspoken. For those children, the cruelest loss was not death, but the lifelong question of whether their father ever truly thought of them. To grow up with that silence is to carry a voice inside your head whispering, "Am I loved?" To look into the mirror and wonder why your story was never allowed to exist. To see yourself in another child, denied recognition not because they were wrong, but because they did not fit into the design of success. And yet, anyone who listens closely to these stories carries something rare: an unburied seed of love, a capacity to feel what others try to forget. That makes them part of the story too. For when these children are acknowledged, even in whispers, they are not just remembered, they are forgiven. And perhaps they learn to forgive themselves. Some men build empires with their voices, but never find a way to build bridges to their own children's hearts. To listen to this story is to carry what others abandoned, to feel not only with reason, but with the deepest vibrations of the soul. And for that, gratitude is due, for choosing to feel what so many chose to silence. Marvin Gaye, the Motown legend, who was murdered by his father. From the time Marvin Gaye was a child, long before he became one of Motown's brightest stars and a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, his father's words haunted him. "You'll never be anything." The boy who would one day add an E to his last name and redefine soul music grew up under the harsh rule of his father, Reverend Marvin Gaye Sr., a strict Pentecostal preacher. According to Steve Turner's biography, Trouble Man, Marvin endured years of physical and emotional abuse. The father-son relationship was fraught with resentment and cruelty, and it would ultimately end in a tragedy that shocked the world. Marvin Sr., fatally shooting his son just hours before his 45th birthday. Resentment fueled much of their conflict. Janice Gaye, Marvin's ex-wife, later recalled how the elder Marvin despised his son's allure with women. As Marvin's star soared with hits like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, What's Going On, and Sexual Healing, his father's bitterness only deepened. Ed Townsend, co-writer of Let's Get It On, told Turner that the conflict escalated when Marvin's success eclipsed his father's authority. It created conflicts when Marvin started to earn more than his daddy, and everybody ran to Marvin. Reverend Gaye, who fancied himself a prophet, was enraged that his son, hailed as a generational voice, was not living what he saw as a godly life. Turner explained in an interview with A&E that this jealousy, compounded by Marvin's closeness to his mother, made the father feel even more displaced. By adulthood, Marvin's life was as troubled as it was glamorous. His celebrated duets with Tammy Terrell ended in heartbreak when she collapsed in his arms on stage and later died of a brain tumor, leaving him devastated. Depression shadowed him for years. The pressure to keep producing hits pushed him toward cocaine, which ravaged his health and deepened his cruelty in personal relationships. Financial ruin followed. According to Divided Soul and reports in Jet magazine, he owed millions, nearly $6 million to the IRS alone, and debts to his ex-wives Janice and Anna. By 1983, stripped of his fortune and spirit, he moved back into his parents' Los Angeles home. The end came swiftly. On April 1st, 1984, the day before his 45th birthday, Marvin stepped into an argument between his parents. "You can't talk to my mother like that," he reportedly told his father. A violent struggle erupted. Marvin struck his father, punching him repeatedly in the face. Bruises later confirmed the assault. After retreating to his room, Marvin sat down, only for his father to follow with a .38 caliber revolver. The first shot tore through his heart, lung, liver, stomach, and kidney, killing him instantly. His father then stepped closer and fired a second point-blank shot into his shoulder. Filicide, the killing of one's own child, is most often associated with very young victims. A Brown University study revealed that 72% of children murdered by their parents are under the age of 6. Adult offspring account for just 18% of such cases, and when it happens, fathers are responsible nearly 80% of the time. Maternal cases are often linked to stress or lack of support, while paternal cases are more frequently tied to rage, jealousy, and extreme violence, often carried out with a firearm. Marvin Gaye's death bore many of these hallmarks. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., had a long history of domestic abuse, mounting financial troubles, and a rigid belief that what he had done was justified. He later claimed self-defense, insisting he feared his son's strength and drug use. Yet Marvin's mother, Alberta, told biographer David Ritz that when she spoke to her husband after posting his $30,000 bail, she was stunned by his lack of remorse. "He started speaking to me but said nothing about Marvin." His eyes were dry. He wasn't apologetic or repentant. He acted like someone who had finally gotten something out of the way. Evidence suggested the father's threats had been long-standing. According to biographer Steve Turner, Marvin's bodyguard Andrew White once played him a recording where Marvin repeated his father's chilling warning, "I brought you into the world, and if you cross me, I can take you out." White believed Marvin saw those words as an invitation, almost a way to surrender to fate. In his mind, Being killed by his father was a form of escape, a twisted way of ending his own suffering while leaving his father burdened with guilt. Marvin's brother Frankie recalled his siblings' haunting final words. "I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I made him do it." Beneath the glamour and hits, Marvin had never escaped the wounds of his abusive childhood. He was a sensitive soul, Turner explained. He thought deeply, and he could never understand why his father didn't acknowledge his success or give him some praise. Despite the cruelty, Marvin still tried to earn his father's respect, buying him cars, inviting him to concerts, treating him with honor. But approval never came. After the killing, Alberta could not bear to return to the family home. "I'll never live there again because it's nothing but a tomb to me," she said. She filed for divorce but settled for a permanent separation. Marvin Sr., then 70, was sentenced to a 6-year suspended sentence and 5 years of probation, his punishment reduced because of his poor health and the fact that Marvin had struck him during the fight. Doctors also discovered and removed a brain tumor before the trial. Any reprieve was short-lived. By the time of his release, he was drinking heavily, nearly a fifth of vodka a day, according to Alberta. In 1998, he died of pneumonia in a nursing home. The father outlived the son, but the tragedy ensured that neither would ever escape the shadow of their violent bond. Marvin Gaye's story is one of brilliance and heartbreak, a legacy of music intertwined with wounds that time has not fully healed. His children, each in their own way, continue to carry the weight of his name while carving out identities beyond it. But the question remains, how should the world remember them? Through the shadow of their father's tragedy, or through the strength they've shown in preserving his legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us on this journey of music, family, and truth.